2, and 1. Hello to each of you in your respective places. I'm hoping that you're doing better than well in all ways. I am your host, Nikki Roach, and you are tuned in to another segment of Conversations in the Nick of Time. And you know, those who are the regulars, what we do on this platform. And those of you who are new, welcome. And we are appreciative of your ear. Well, here on this platform, we talk about leadership excellence and leadership accidents. We know that it takes each of those things to be successful, and that's success as you define it. Want to also take the time to thank and celebrate our sponsors, Sparkman Pathway to Careers, KSTL 690, Jubilee, and Covenant Exchange LLC. Just always grateful to have our various guests from around the world, thanks to the blessing of actually one of the blessings from COVID-19 and the pandemic. I know we talked about a number of different hiccups and different changes and the constant change, and we have this language about going back to what was, what is, and what was normal and going back. But today, I think we're going to kind of crush some of those things and understand the importance of not crushing to destroy, but stepping to crush to propel and to move into new space. And when we talk about this, the word that comes to mind from our special guest today is FLUX. I am so excited to have April Rinne virtually with us today to talk about her new book. We're going to get more into that. You do not want to miss not one moment of this. But let me take a moment to set the stage. A World Economic Forum young global leader and ranked one of the 50 leading female futurists in the world by Forbes. April Rinne is a change navigator. She helps individuals and organizations rethink and reshape their relationship with change, uncertainty, and a world in flux. She is a trusted advisor to well-known startups, companies, financial institutions, nonprofits, and think tanks worldwide, including just a few that you may have heard of: Airbnb, Nike, Intuit, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, NESTA, Trōv, AnyRoad, and Unsettled, as well as government ranging from Singapore to South Africa, Canada to Colombia, Italy to India. April is the author of FLUX, 8 Superpowers for thriving in constant change, and it is due out in just a few weeks, and we're going to jump right in. And as you can see, I'm beyond excited. I'm stumbling over my words, but we're going to get it together. April, how are you?
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Nikki. I'm well, and I'm really happy to be here with you today.
Wonderful. Now, you have such a broad, wide reach in your work as a change agent, change navigator, change maker. What is it that stimulated the root of all of this before we go any further?
Oh yeah, my journey to flux, as I like to call it. So I'll try to keep it brief, but there are a few layers that I think really set the stage for a deeper conversation. Okay. And you've touched upon a couple of them, but not all of them. So the first one, in my role as a futurist and as an advisor, and for the past many years where I've been working with companies and governments and for-profits and nonprofits and domestic and international and like all these different organizations. And one thing I've discovered is that like every single organization and the people in it struggles with change. Not always in the same way. Yep. Not always in the same way, but we all do, right? There's just so much we can do better. And I know we're going to get into unpacking some of this stuff around our relationships to change. So I'll leave that for later. But that in my role as a futurist and helping organizations understand where the future is heading, and not the future, but like what's on the horizon, what potential futures could play out, what forces do we need to be paying attention to? Like I saw this again and again. So that's part of what's behind FLUX and my desire to write this book. Also, as you mentioned, my career has been entirely international. So I'm working with different countries and cultures and peoples on a regular basis. And over the last 2+ decades, I have seen also that every single culture, every single society, every single kind of people, if you will, also struggles with change. Yeah. But every culture has developed different ways of seeing change, talking about it, thinking about it, rituals and traditions around it. And that's really cool because everywhere has developed ways of grappling with change that other places can learn from. But for the most part, we don't know about it. So I'm sort of trying to connect those dots and just highlight not just the power of the diversity that we have on this planet today and what an incredible gift that is, but also to show how much we can learn from one another. And then the third, and really, you know, this is kind of the start of my FLUX journey, goes back, gosh, more than 25 years now. And it is what I call a very human take on change and our fears and anxieties and like, what do you do when you don't know what to do? Yeah. And it can be paralyzing and it can be life-changing and it can be so many different things. And when I was 20, so I was in college, both of my parents died in a car accident. And, you know, I realized that I've just kind of put like a hand grenade into our conversation. That's not what I mean. I love to talk about this now because it's led to so much growth. But I bring this up because that was the genesis, the seed where my journey to FLUX began was when I was 20. And all of a sudden, whatever I thought my future was going to be, whatever I thought my world looked like, it just changed. And there was nothing I could do about it other than figure out how to move forward. And so this was, how do I rebuild my family? What do I do about my career? Because at age 20, I was studying. I knew how to like kind of take care of myself day to day, but I had no idea.
You were in London right at that time.
Mm-hmm. I was at Oxford. I was studying there. I had actually I kid you not, it happened in June. I had just packed my bags. I was just finishing up for the term. I was so excited for what came next. And I got a phone call, right? And this is pre-Facebook, pre-smartphone days. So it's like a landline, you know, and I'm standing in this house where I'm living. And it's just like, you just see, it felt figuratively like the house around me, it just started to like crumble. So yes, I had to come back and it changed everything. To this day, I can say it was the hardest single thing I've been through. But on the flip side, I also now know I can get through a lot because of what I've been through. But back to the kind of flux, and from that point forward, and you know, here I'm here today to talk about what we can all learn. How can I serve others? But from that point forward, I got really interested in peeling back the layers of my own relationship to change and how complicated and messy it was. And then I realized along the way, man, not just me, like we all have these hangups about change. My experience was perhaps more extreme, a little bit more tragic, but you know, there are seeds of wisdom that I think can help everyone. And that's part of why I'm here, excited to talk to you today, but that gives you a little more, it's not one take on change. It's really trying to layer together the many different kinds of insights or ideas I can bring to others, but also it appeals in that regard to a wide range of audiences and how it can help and how it can serve.
Right. And I love the human element that you brought. It's a reality, it's a lived experience for you, but yet it's something that we all can adapt to. And so I've had a past guest who came on and spoke to us about grief and going through the various processes of grief. And in that conversation, we learned to rethink and reimagine what the word grief meant, which is right in alignment with this conversation today, that grief is not necessarily a loss of a person, but it can be of a thing. It can be of a situation. And we still go through these phases. And sometimes we repeat those phases. Sometimes we skip some of those phases, but something within causes some of us to propel, as I mentioned earlier, from a scenario or situation, loss, while some of us need a little nudge to move forward.
And I think there's a really interesting, you know, it's fascinating because the book is not about me. It's not a memoir or anything, but my story and what I've learned is a kind of through thread. It's also not a book about grief per se, but grief is a very constant through thread because it's not just loss of a person. What's fascinating for a lot of people, and again, I'm jumping a little farther ahead. We can come back to like our relationship to change. Maybe I'll mention it here because it kind of tees things up nicely. That, you know, our relationships to change are complicated and messy, right? We've got, on the one hand, changes. Humans tend to generally love change that we opt into, right? You've got a new relationship, a new job.
We
like
flirt with it. We
love change, right? We love that kind of change. But we really hate and resist and struggle with change we can't control. So that change that blindsides you on a Tuesday afternoon, it goes against your expectations, it disrupts your plans, right? Think about the last year and a half, how many changes that we've been like, no, but we can't control it, right? It's a pandemic, or it's a lockdown, or it's a variant, and you know, that's just public health, never mind other very large seismic shifts and changes that are heading our way. So we really struggle with that kind of change we can't control. And for many people, that's where the fear and the paralysis and the anxiety kicks in. But that's also that kind of change a lot of people interpret as loss. Something happened and I can't get it back. Something happened and I lost what was there before. And that's where grief, the relationship to grief, kicks in. And it's fascinating because you can grieve a lot of things. We can all grieve right now. And I don't know that we would, not everyone in the same way, but certain aspects we can grieve pre-COVID life. Yeah. And that's interesting, right? We're not going to get it back.
Correct.
But what's fascinating to me is you do want to engage that grief process. You want to allow time for grieving because it's true. We lost something. But that doesn't mean that we can't still have a brighter future tomorrow. We can't still have a brighter, path forward. But yeah, it gets really complicated. And then, for a lot of people, grief equals loss, equals being lost, right? And feeling lost and feeling disoriented and uprooted. And what do you do when you don't know what to do, right?
Yeah.
But part of what the book does, among other things, I kind of unpack what, experiencing loss and feeling lost, sometimes they go together, but those are very different things.
Yeah.
Right. I think actually getting lost is how you can get yourself found as well.
Yes. And I love the fact, because I'm all about definitions and terminology. I'm an educator at heart. So even in right here, how is it that you're defining flux?
Oh, I love that you bring this up. Okay. I love etymology and languages, and a lot of it's come through the cultural piece as well. So flux is both a noun and a verb.
Okay.
Now, most people know it as the noun, which means continuous change, right? A world in flux.
Going with the flow. Yeah.
Yep. But flux is also a verb. And as a verb, it means to learn to become fluid. And I love this verb, this word. So not only is the word in flux, not only is the world in flux, we need to learn how to flux, how to become fluid in the face of change. Yeah. And so then we end up with the flux mindset and the flux superpowers and all the rest. But excuse me, that's where the word comes from. And it's really fun to riff on because there are overlaps with everything from resilience and adaptability and agility. But flux is this kind of interesting thing. It has overlaps with all of those terms, but it's also its own standalone framing, and it's also very fun to riff on because I talk about like your fluxiness, your flux factor, and people kind of like it. It's a fun word to say.
I know, and so I also looked up the word, and that one thing that you just mentioned in regards to understanding that it is a noun and a verb, it causes us to have to rise to the occasion of in some sense. And go ahead.
Oh, the verb, it's action.
That's it calls us to action. And my thing is, so I love the fact that you have caused us to take a step back to understand it is two separate things. And but we don't necessarily always think that. We just think, oh, it's just change. We don't go to the call of action.
Yep.
And the fact that it's a word, but also there's a state of flex.
Yep. Absolutely love this. And sorry, I'm so enthusiastic that I'm like running over your thoughts, and that's not my intention at all. But to riff on that, to pick up on that too. So it is both a state of being and a state of action. Also, though, on that point about like state of action, if we think about how we typically, how we think about change, we try to react to it. Like a change happens and we react. We do something. We take action, but to that one thing. So like, oh, I'm going to bounce back. Oh, change happened and I'm going to get back to where I was. As though, and this is the part of it is human hardwiring. Part of it is how we're socialized and what we're taught to believe, how the world works and so forth. But it's as though, okay, change happens, I react to it, problem solved, move on. And yet a world in flux teaches us that that is just not the way that change is working. This is not just reacting or responding, because the way I like to think about it is there is no steady state. There is no bouncing back to what, right?
But that is what we cling to.
Yes. What I'm looking at though, there is a path through this. And that is that instead of reacting or responding in a kind of tit for tat way, or however you want to phrase it.
Was it flight or fright?
Sorry?
Flight, fright.
Flight, fight, or freeze.
Freeze.
Mm-hmm. And that gets into our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems and all of that. But taking a step back, I'm looking at moving forward. If we know that the future is more change, more uncertainty, more unpredictability. It's not more certainty. It's certainly not more predictability. The future is more flux. Then we need to radically reshape our relationship to change from the inside out. And that's different. It can include reacting or responding, but it's really taking a holistic look at how we think about and relate to change as a whole. And that to me makes me really excited, because when I think about not just a flux mindset, but this whole conversation, these aren't simply skills for your job or simply skills for your relationships or your family. These are skills for life, because as long as we're going to have change in this world, which I think is a pretty long time, and I think there's probably more, not less of it moving forward, this just gets stronger and stronger and more helpful.
And talk about finding some balance when you get a chance to actually sit back and as the listeners get a moment to take all this in and then press pause after listening. This can be somewhat frightening, because you're going to have to be vulnerable. You're going to have to be honest. And because we're so wrapped up in being busy with what we don't want to change, that is hard to shift. And I want to hop into back in, I think it's November 2019. The TEDx Frankfurt, you did a TEDx talk on how to navigate our uncertain future. You talk about a number of different things, but you talk about this idea of fixed mindset. And we had past guest Nicholas Powell, Dr. Nicholas Powell, talked about fixed mindset versus growth mindset and the crazy difference between the two, which we were like, but you lead us into not only this growth mindset, but now there's a flux mindset. You give three, I want people to go and watch it, but I do want to lift out one of them that actually shook me and kind of caught me off guard. Because I thought I was doing well, but I did your activity about expand your peripheral vision, literally and figuratively. Unpack that for us.
Yeah. So let's go back real quick to the fixed and growth mindset and just kind of get our bearings. And actually even one step before that, where I realize I get very enthusiastic and we dive straight into conversation and they're like, oh my God, there's a lot. Yeah. I completely, like, part of me is like, everyone who's listening, deep breath. Okay, we're going to get through. Yeah. At the same time, yes, a lot of what I'm talking about, we can think of it as feeling scary if we want. I look at this as what greater gift and what greater asset, if you will, than boosting your self-awareness in ways that are going to power you through life. So yeah, take some work being vulnerable and going within, but the payoff, the reward, the benefit is like, oh my gosh, readiness for life. So I always like to kind of say you do need to work your way through it, but what's waiting for you on the other side of that, walking through that fire, is pretty magnificent, right?
Yeah.
So fixed versus growth mindset, I love, had to do, and I've done a lot of research over the years. I'm very familiar with it. People often say, what's the difference between a growth mindset and a flux mindset? I don't get it. Or can you explain it to me? And so, fixed mindset is this sense of like, you're born, the mindset you have when you're born is more or less static and you kind of don't veer much from it. A growth mindset is much more about this. Your state of mind can adapt and evolve and grow as you grow. It's awesome. And I do build on the growth mindset foundation. The difference or the addition is that for the most part, a growth mindset is focused on children as they learn. Can we adapt and grow? Can children, and if you look at the research that is behind it, it's all about children, and that's awesome. But what it doesn't really talk about is what happens when things change. Like, we need a growth mindset, but even a growth mindset does not ensure that you're good at navigating change. It just ensures that your brain will continue to evolve. So that's the step that we're taking, but it's very much congruent with a growth mindset. I need a growth mindset in order to really be able to flux, again, that verb. So your peripheral vision, here we start getting into one of the 8 flux superpowers, and they're super fun to talk about, and I could talk about them for days, so we'll try to keep it brief. But this is really, so your peripheral vision, think about what society typically tells us to focus on. They say, focus on what's straight ahead, right? Whether that's a goal or a destination. And I'm all for focus. I'm not anti-focus. But what is interesting is we as humanity writ large, I think we are obsessed with what's focusing, with what's right in front of us, with what we can see.
Yeah.
By and large, we're so focused on that we're not actually seeing a whole lot of what's going on, what is actually going on in the world, which we could think of as being outside our periphery. We can think of it as being invisible. Now, it's invisible because we've trained ourselves to not see it. Oftentimes, it's not that it's not technically like invisible, like air. It's that we've been socialized into seeing certain things and not seeing other things. And so when you learn how to expand your peripheral vision, literally and figuratively, so in my talk, there are exercises you can do.
To do an exercise.
Yeah.
I don't know. You can walk us through it if you
Sure, I'll walk us through it. But also figuratively, that when we are limiting our peripheral vision and focusing on what's right in front of us, and actually, oftentimes that's called also tunnel vision, like your vision narrows and your scope of what you think is possible narrows. Like what we're doing is in the process, we're leaving out opportunities that are right there. We just, quote unquote, don't see them. We're leaving value on the table. We're leaving, issues also. I mean, this cuts both ways. Both we're missing opportunities, but we're also really stuck in our blind spots. We're blinded to some things that we really do need to see in terms of issues and challenges we also need to solve. So it cuts lots of different ways. So to expand your peripheral vision, it's funny, I haven't led this exercise in a while, so I might get my words a little bit wrong, but it's kind of fun. So take your hands and put them in front of your face, sort of palms facing you. Then take your thumbs and put your thumbs on your ears like this. You kind of, if you can see yourself in the mirror, you look a little like an elephant, right? And then wiggle your fingertips and then move your fingertips back so that they're kind of parallel with facing the screen or facing whatever you're looking at, right? Okay. Now, pay attention to your fingertips. And there's a point at which all of a sudden you can't see your fingertips, correct, right? And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, where'd they go? like it's really, my fingertips disappeared. What you're looking at right now with your fingertips, that's your peripheral vision. Now, on the first try, it often feels awkward and you're like, what am I doing? But I want you to keep paying attention to where your fingertips are. And all of a sudden, you're going to see stuff on your periphery that you never noticed before. Now, it might just be a wall or a painting or who knows what, but you're going to see it and you're going to like, wow, where's that then the whole time? Well, lo and behold, and you can take down your, and then you can bring your fingers back in if you want, and you'll start seeing them again, so that you can see, basically that's called your range of peripheral vision.
Yeah.
But what I want to remind you is that all that stuff that was where your fingertips are, like, it's always been there, but for the most part, you're only noticing it now. Then you translate that into more, other, it's a symbolic, I think that exercise is symbolic of all the different things we're missing in our lives.
But it's right there.
It's right there. Yeah.
It's right here.
The other one, and if I say this, if you're like, so let's say maybe you're in the car and right now listening and someone's sitting next to you. So don't look at that person. Tell me what color their shirt is. Because there you're like, I don't know, but you could probably see it out your periphery, but you're not looking there typically. That's another fun exercise that you can do even on the go.
And the fact that if you don't know, and you've been with this person and you've been watching them, or either standing there with conversation or sitting there in conversation, like, ooh,
yeah,
like I missed that.
And you're not you, but like all of us, we're spending most of our days like this.
Oh,
and you just think like, wow, there's a whole lot more to life, but also what am I missing that might actually really, really matter?
That's right there.
It's right there. Yeah. It doesn't require any, I love to say this about, all of FLUX. It doesn't require any technology that we don't have. It doesn't require any money. It's all of these tools, all of these skills, all of these practices exist already with what you've got right now. Just takes a little bit of learning, a little bit of encouragement, and to your point, a little bit of, vulnerability and willingness to learn more.
Wow. And so, like I said, I'm going to post the TEDx so individuals can watch, because it's very enlightening. But just to go ahead and put the other two out, when we talk about the FLUX mindset, one was look to other cultures. Two was expand your peripheral vision, literally and figuratively. And then three, learn to let go of the future. And I know we're going to dive into that with the superpowers. So I didn't want to dive into that. But man, I am like messed up right now, because I'm like, what's getting me is that it's right here. And it's a matter of me. And so I always close the show out with this saying, live out success as you define it. You already possess everything you need to be successful. It's just a matter of tapping into it. This is tapping into it.
Very much. And I actually want to give a shout out to you. I love how you say success as you define it. And I want to riff on this a little bit, because it is part of FLUX. It's in the book. It's not a superpower. It's part of sort of the foundation. And it is this sense of what I call, each of us is living a script. And you have a script and I have a script and everyone has a script, and everyone's script is different to some degree because we all have different life experiences. But your script describes the world that you expect to live in. It describes the stories and the narratives and the norms about how you expect the world to work. And in that is also, your script has a definition of success. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to say that it's not about right or wrong or better or worse. It's just a definition. But for the most part, we are taught our scripts quite young, and it depends on where you're born and who raises you and where you live, like all kinds of stuff, right? And again, not getting into that. Everywhere has its pros and everywhere has its cons and challenges, whatever. But for the most part, our script is really clear. And for the most part, society defines what success is, and you're supposed to go live it.
And do all that you can to live out something that is still not clearly defined by society.
Correct. And something that you may or may not have opted into. And I'm not by any means, we want to strive. We want to have goals. We want to achieve things and reach our full potential. Yeah. But by and large, our definition of success is it comes from other people. And we don't pause to think about, what is my definition of success? Yeah. What's fascinating is a lot of people, they're like, it's not what society, as far as I can tell, society's definition, it's kind of exhausting. It's kind of, wait a minute. But the connection I want to draw with FLUX here is that when change hits, like really hits, that's when this sense of what's working and what isn't, all of a sudden you go, whoa, there's like this opening, this crack that, and I think the last year has shown a lot of people. We used to define that, you know, you fit your life around your work because that's how society defines success. And all of a sudden you're like, it's not this, and it wasn't working well before, but we get this chance to redefine. And so back to scripts
and what we
write
were
our
looking
own
at.
script. Precisely. But we have this amazing chance, and it doesn't require a pandemic. Anyone can do this at any point in time. A pandemic is sort of the like wake up call that jolts you into perhaps seeing what you'd been missing before. But we have this chance to write a new script that you are the author of, that you have a say in what it says, and that's fit for a world in flux. And that's not a world that we can control or predict, or, you know, where humans are sort of, that's all old script. That script is starting to break, and it's breaking more every day. But there's this exciting new script that allows each of us to come into our own a bit more than has been the case over the last many years.
Yeah.
So I love the way you define success, because it's very congruent with this notion of a new script that you're the author of.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because for me anyway, I've matured into that space. And even more since the pandemic, but because prior to that, I was there, but I mean, I was able to just kind of step all the way into the space. And this whole idea of flux and being and doing, you know, working it out, you know, having it present in my life, but actually working it out in my life. It has been challenging because not only does it impact you as the individual, but everything around you. And that's that vulnerability, that's that that confidence, that's that unapologeticness that you have. You have to be ready. And I don't say that in a scary way, but the thing is, don't walk into this idea that I want to have this flux mindset and I want to have a state of being in this space, and other things don't change, because everything around you is going to change when you embrace it.
Right. I love this.
Yeah.
Nikki, this is great. This is great, Nikki. And also this sense of, I want a flux mindset. Don't expect no one else, either way, someone else isn't going to give it to you. You have to actually do the work, but as a result, you are your own being. You are. So this sense, because I think when you grow up and like society tells you what to do, you don't have to think that much if you're willing to kind of go along with what they're telling you to do. But then you go, wait, whose life is this? Is this the life that I chose, or the life that I'm living out for someone else, or according to someone else's expectations? So you do have to kind of step into those shoes. But again, goes back to the whole, you know, the benefits, the outcome, what's on the other side. When you do develop that flux mindset, it's, you know, it changes your life absolutely for the better. So yeah.
What's your take then on imposter syndrome? Because this it was around for a little bit, but now it has just taken on arms and legs of its own. And as you know, I'm sure in your research, you know that women suffer from this. Research says more than men, when we break it down to men versus women, and then women of color more so than just women, the general population of women. And this whole concept of flux, I mean, we can go so deep. I mean, this is such a deep topic when we talk about that space, and the advancement. And when we talk about equity and equality, I am an advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion, a practitioner of it, also consultant in that space. However, I always say there is a part that I have to own, and I have to also correct, but also I need to flux, you know, now that we have this new term when it comes to even the imposter syndrome. What's your take on that?
Yeah, gosh, there's so many good questions packed into that, because there is the question of imposter syndrome, which I too have struggled with for much, if not most of my life. There are the issues of systemic injustice, inequality, inequity, how we're showing up, how we're seen, right? Which there's a there is a subtext throughout the book. So it was interesting because it got to the point where I just kept writing and writing and writing. And my editor's like, we got to stop. Like, but we stop. But we kept getting feedback where people were saying, you need to write a manifesto. You need to write like this is not just about you and me. This is like, we need to correct the ills of society, organizations in flux, society in flux. Not so much human rights in flux per se, but like tolerance in flux and the me versus the we, and all of that. Right. And I was really excited, and I do dig into that to some degree in the book. There is a clear kind of sub message there, but my editor was also like, that's the next book, because we can't, we got too many books here, right? And the funny thing is, as an author, then you realize, right, I don't want to write too long of a book that people look at and they're like, that's intimidating, can't do it, right? So I so value what you're saying right now. And let me just share a couple things, but back to imposter syndrome, which does relate also to the social inequity. It's related in that it's about how we show up and how we're seen. Okay. Right. And so imposter syndrome, when we're able to flux, and, again, it's not a panacea. It's not a silver bullet, like the magic solution. No such thing exists, but it is a really empowering mental muscle to develop that helps you show up more fully, full stop.
And that's a whole nother topic, right?
Yeah, exactly. I realized with my imposter syndrome and just feeling like I wasn't ever, well, it relates, now I'm realizing it relates in more ways than I thought even, that on the one, so a couple things that come to mind, and we can see which one you like most that we can head into. But a lot of my imposter syndrome was this sense of, I'm not enough. I'm just not enough. Like, I'm not showing up, and not like, I'm a farce, right? And one of the 8 flux superpowers is actually know you're enough. Mm-hmm. And so, and we might be able to riff on it there. I want to come back to another angle though, but know you're enough just in a nutshell. This is about our obsession with more. And again, society has trained us that more is not only better, more is the only way you're going to be of value to society, right? You need to always after more. And the more you own or earn, or the more love, or the more likes, or the more power, more. Wow. Okay. Where'd that come from? Right? Compared to, have you ever heard of this thing called enough? And enough is not too much, not too little, but it's a point of sufficiency and contentedness, a point of balance and harmony, right?
Yes.
The way I like to frame this, when we are always after more, we will never find enough. And think about that, because when you get more, what do you want? You want more. You want more. It never ends. But when you know you're enough, and here I mean you're enough, Y-O-U-R, like your point of sufficiency, but that also includes when you know that you are enough, and you always have been ever since the day you were born, you will immediately begin to find abundance. And so it's interesting because there's this whole like head fake kind of thing here, but we have been, and I say we collectively, I realize I don't want to generalize or speak for anyone else, but everyone on the planet in their own way has been trained to see certain things and to not see other things. And I think one of the biggest problems, and again, we can talk about it here in the US, we can talk about it globally too. We are trained to see people in a certain way and to not see them in another, or to see certain kinds of people in one way or not another. And it's endemic. And one of these superpowers is also learning how to see what's invisible, which again, not invisible in that it wasn't there before, but we were trained not to see it.
This is good.
And so I get really excited. I mean, I'm mixing a few things together here, but when I begin to peel back the layers of the flux superpowers, you cannot have a flux mindset and not see all humans as having, and again, it's funny, we can use the word equal. I like to say everyone with enough dignity, enough integrity, but as peers. And the other piece that I was just going to mention around, which is a slightly different take, but around imposter syndrome, there's just a meta issue across the book around anxiety and just our anxiety that we have about change, anxiety about, who I am and am I enough and da, da, da. And for me, it was only peeling back the layers of just how deeply my anxiety ran and how much it was affecting me feeling like an imposter, that then I realized, my goodness, we are in an epidemic of anxiety as well. And when we can all figure out and get beyond our own anxieties, the vast majority of which is completely unfounded. Again, it's stuff that society has scripted to us, not that we've chosen. Then you start to actually, what is it? Like not unlock, let go of some of that imposter syndrome.
Yeah. And what's so interesting about this conversation, while we're talking about ourselves, using ourselves, we're using individualism, we're also talking, in regards to society in some capacity, and their contributions to this conversation and our manner of showing up or lack thereof. What's interesting is that all of the information that you're sharing is so very fluid and transformative in the sense that every system has subsystems. Every system and subsystem has culture. And with that, when we talk about leaders, and I don't mean leaders with titles, I'm just saying those who are showing up and giving it what they've got, understanding their own assignment. They're not just there to crank some stuff out on an assembly line. But again, that's back to my mindset and having a flux, a change that I'm not here. This is not just a job. I call them paid internships to help us become leaders. But yet how this information someone who's leading a group could begin to operate in this space of flux, but then also transcend this same behavior to the team.
Yep.
I'm getting it.
I'm so happy. Well, and here I'll share with you the language more or less that I use. So I love the universality of flux, right? Yes. I also love that it is both timely. So very much of them here and now, like you can imagine, my world's in flux right now. I need this. It's also really timeless, because so long as there's change in the world, we're going to need these superpowers. We're going to need to figure out how to flux. But what you've just described, the best way to sort of define it is what I call scale free. So it applies at any unit of abstraction, any scale. So individuals can have a flux mindset. Organizations can definitely have a flux mindset. It's part of your organizational culture if you do it well. Societally, I would say we desperately need flux mindsets. We don't have them yet, but you can sort of take it, to your point, it can apply to you as an individual. It's something you can help instill and teach your colleagues about, your direct reports, your allies, your friends. It's something, and I get this a lot, where people are like, wait a minute, adults who are parents, they're like, I need this for my kids, right? How do I teach my kids to be more fluxy? So it's great because it does have very much universal utility, but the scale free means, you can zoom in and zoom out, and we have flux at all these different levels too. So a flux mindset can help at these different layers or scales as well.
Yeah. And I know we have a lot of listeners of this platform that are often in transition in some shape, form, or fashion. And even in your comment, it reminded me of those who are in transition, as whether it's you as an entrepreneur or going to another company. You need to ask when you are interviewing, whether it's a vendor, a partner, because people think, oh, I'm a solopreneur. You're a solopreneur only to a certain degree, because you have to have vendors to help you do
clients.
What you do.
You need clients, you need customers, you need allies, you need colleagues, even if you're on your own.
Even on your own. But even if you're applying for a job at a company, ask you, what is the company or the potential partner, what is their tolerance for error? And they say that we all say we're innovators, you know, we're cutting edge, we're in front of the game. We're not only creating the game, but we're the future of the game. So we have all these sayings, but we're not tolerant, yet very prescriptive in our approach, which takes us away from this conversation of having this flux mindset and creating a flux culture.
Yes. Well, and I'll share a couple examples. So you nailed it. And keep in mind that there's no organization out there that tells the company what it can and can't say from a marketing perspective, right? Everywhere can be full of innovators. Everywhere can be the most open, friendly, diverse, take your pick. There's no one, there's no metric where people are like, you didn't pass that test, right? You can market whatever you want. It's up to all of us to actually scratch beneath that surface and be like, wait a minute, is this surface or is this substance? Are you walking the talk? Really interesting that's happening right now. And it's so funny because in a way, I couldn't have scripted the launch of my book better at this time of great flux where there's reopening. Oh, wait, maybe not. Wait, there's a variant. Wait, now what? Like there is just like, and that's only one example, right? I haven't talked about climate or weather patterns in flux. I haven't talked about automation or the future of work in flux, just reopening, right? Yeah. But exactly what you're talking about. The organizations I'm most concerned about right now are the ones who are like, hybrid work, we got it figured out. We know what to do. Yeah. Reopening, we have our plan. We're ready to go and it's going to work great. I'm like, let's talk in 6 weeks, right? And not that that's good or bad. It's just more a matter of talent. If you're working in a place, is the organization able to be humble and vulnerable in a way that's like, listen, we have not figured it out yet, but we know that no one has. Because in my view, anyone who tells you they've figured it out, that's actually a signal of mistrust, not a reason to trust them, because no one has. And we're going to have to experiment and iterate. But if a company can convey to you, we haven't figured it out yet, but we promise you that we are in this together. We are going to take your input into consideration. And we are going to continue to work as hard as we need to get it right over time. That to me is signaling a kind of trust, as opposed to leave it to us. We got it. We'll just convey the message to you down, when it's ready. At the same time, though, a lot of workers, so it cuts both ways. Leadership needs to be much better on the whole, in my opinion, about conveying that they don't know, and that's okay.
It's okay.
But we're going to iterate. Talent needs to actually calm down a little bit and realize, because what's happening is a lot of workers are saying, we just need to know. And I get it, right? But workers are putting often unreasonable demands on leadership. They're expecting them to have answers that no one has. For workers to say, rather than trying, this goes back to our relationship to control and trying to predict the future, rather than trying to predict the future and needing crystal clear certainty that it's going to play out, the chances are far better that it's not going to play out. We need to get much more comfortable preparing for many different possible futures that could. Yeah, I love. And there's an element of patience there. There is an element of empathy. There is an element that we do have the same goals at the end of the day, which is to navigate this change well. But the more pressure we put on other people that they have to get it right now, the more we're actually shooting all of ourselves in the foot, so to speak. So I bring that up too, because if you're in, and I love, if you're in transition, you're just in flux, right? Careers in flux, jobs in flux, like it's all flux. Yeah. So there's no better time to learn about this flux mindset, but also to realize that it actually could shape or reshape even how you relate to future employers, how the kinds of questions you ask in job interviews, whether you consider maybe launching your own venture at some point. Like all of these things come into the mix.
Yeah, this is great. Your book, and we see it over your shoulder. I love it.
Oh yeah, I have it now. I'm very happy.
8 powerful shifts. We're talking about these 8 powerful shifts. We've tapped into a couple of them. And these shifts, these are to thrive in times of constant change. And those of you who are jumping in with April Rinne, and she is, I'm telling you, you are so on point and speaking my language. I could talk to you all day, but I want to shift this at, as we begin to bring things to a close. There are 8 superpowers in the book that you run through. And if I'm going to run through the 8 just with what it is, but I want you to take one that is your favorite so we can order our own books and read through the rest. But I want you to pick one from the 8 that you want to expound on. So 1, run slower. 2, see what's invisible. 3, get lost. 4, start with trust. 5, know you're enough. 6, create your portfolio career. 7, be all the more human and serve other humans. And 8, let go of the future. Which one do you want to expound on for us?
Such a good, so let's see. We've dabbled a little bit into know you're enough.
Mm-hmm.
We've dabbled a little bit into let go of the future, which is your relationship to control. I would say, so, and I'm thinking about who might be listening.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to say that, well, 2 things. One is the superpower, the one that I find so much comes back to again and again. So like a really good like meta chapter is the 4th one, start with trust. So we could talk about trust for a week. I mean, everything comes down to trust.
Okay.
But the one that I kind of want to focus on to expand a little bit more on is related to leadership, but also how we see our careers. So it's actually creating a portfolio career.
Okay.
And I think this one is fun because it's very practical and tactical, but also kind of visionary as you think through your professional journey.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, it builds on what we were just talking about. So it's funny because people say, which one's your favorite? I'm like, that's like asking who your favorite kid is, right? You don't want to, I don't know. And I don't have my favorite superpower. It changes by day, by week, whatever. Right now, this one feels good because if we're thinking about our own professional journeys, our own leadership journeys, but also the teams that we're managing, our colleagues, etc. What the 6th superpower, create your portfolio career, says is that to thrive in a world in flux, we need to rethink our career and treat it more like a portfolio to curate, like an artist or an investor would, rather than a linear path to pursue, a ladder to climb, something to get to the top of, a kind of, again, that singular focus. And I find that again and again, this is super sticky. It's empowering. What we're looking at is a future of work that is in flux, right? And whether that's the rise of independent talent, whether that's the rise of remote work, whether that is automation and all the unknowns that come along with that, how do we navigate that and feel whole? The portfolio concept, and I love it. And again, we could riff on this for a long time, but this is really thinking through rather than a linear path like study, work, retire, climb the ladder, go, go, go. A portfolio is much more, what are all of the skills and roles and capabilities that you have that you can mix and match in myriad different ways that make you uniquely qualified to do whatever it is that you're doing today and whatever it is you want to do in the future. And so again, it's this sense of reshaping how we think about and develop our careers, not as I need to climb the next step and get the next title and get the promotion. That's very old school thinking. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's actually very, very outdated. Rather than a portfolio, which is something that you take ownership and responsibility for. You are the only person on the planet with your particular portfolio that you then get to curate, again, like an artist or an investor would. You need to communicate and convey what your portfolio is, why it makes you uniquely qualified to do what it is that you want to do. But importantly, what I love reminding people is every single person already today has a portfolio. You may just not realize it. Yeah. And your portfolio is way bigger and far more interesting, in my opinion, than your CV or your resume. It includes what's on your CV, but it also includes skills. For example, my favorite probably is anyone who's a parent. Think about the skills that parenting have taught you. Some of the most important skills on the planet they don't end up on your resume typically. Like,
Right.
what's up with that, right? They're absolutely in your portfolio, and you can harness and leverage them and market your portfolio to others. It includes, whether you've had a title or not, whether you've been paid for something or not. All of this goes into your portfolio because you can then mix and match and recombine it to do even more things moving forward. So it's not just for you. The other piece I just want to put on here, as a leader, and particularly if you're a leader managing and working with other people, part of your role becomes not just to develop your own portfolio, but to help others develop theirs.
Right.
Because how you get excited and how you feel optimistic about a future of work that's in flux, is if you know that you actually have lots of options on the table. And the way that you do that, a portfolio gives you all kinds of options that a resume does not, that a linear career path does not.
Right.
And so the best thing you can do, and the way that you really, I think, walk the talk as it comes to helping others on their leadership journeys. And if in my opinion, the greatest hallmark of leadership, great leadership, is being able to identify and cultivate leadership in others. Helping others curate their portfolio careers is absolutely the way that you help everyone thrive. Now, I get that I'm going against what society tells us a lot, which is like, they're your competitors. We have to own our talent. You have to work your way up, right? What I'm saying is very contrarian, very counterintuitive to that, yet it's much, much, much more fit for a world in flux.
Yeah. And it allows you, as you said earlier, to really show up.
Yeah, it allows
I've
you to build
experienced
a career that you find meaningful and
Correct.
purposeful.
Correct.
And allows you to fit work around life, not life around work as well.
They say build it around the life you imagine.
Yep.
So we always close out with a word or a saying that would help someone in the nick of time. And if you had to think of one word that comes to your mind right now, what would that one word be?
The one word, wow. Other than flux, it would be equanimity.
Okay.
The ability to have grace under pressure. The ability to actually just take a step back and say, I got this.
I love it. I love it. Now, the book is coming out in a couple of weeks, but you can go and pre-order. And where can individuals find you?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me and the book at fluxmindset.com. So me, and I'm super easy to find. If you want to learn more about me, I'm also at aprilrinne.com, but the fluxmindset.com. And also there's more information about Flux. Like, I'm trying to make as much as I can just publicly available. Yeah. And also I can tell you launch date is August 24th, but the audiobook is already available. I did not know. So anyone who's listening and likes audiobook, like, you can go read this now.
Audio junkie.
Yeah, so it's already available. I did not know that was possible until it just went up last week.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Whose voice is being used on this book?
I got to narrate it. Yeah. So I narrated my own book. It was amazing. The longest talk I've ever given, 248 pages, but it went really well. I guess if you're listening, if you enjoyed this conversation, you'll hear more of me, which I'm hoping is a good thing.
Yes.
But yeah, that was a total joy to narrate that, and exhausting, but such a great learning experience. And the final product came out really well. So Good. Thanks for asking.
Good. I am so I'm excited because I'm like finding the book because I have a credit on my Audible.
There we go.
So I will be downloading that once we wrap up.
Thank you, Nikki. I love it.
No, this is great. And again, you can go to April Rinne, and it's APRILRINNE.com. Yeah. And you can find out more information, get your book. This has been such a joy to learn from you, to have this experience, to share space with you. Thank you. I feel like I have been to class and I'm ready to roll. And as you say, exercise this muscle.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. And thank everyone who's joined. And thank you for inviting me and just holding this space and indulging me in this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. This won't be the last time. As things begin to unfold, this platform, we are here to support your efforts moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Want to thank all of our listeners for giving us your time, your head, your heart. And now we've given you something to place in your hands to do.